Amazing CEO exposed, kicked out of her hotel, she surprisingly demands justice in just 5 minutes. Emma Carter stood at the imposing entrance of the Skyline Hotel, her heart racing. The glimmering facade of the hotel held a promise of opportunity, a chance to showcase her groundbreaking accessibility technology, a vision seeded by her father's unwavering belief in service to others. But today, that glistened promise felt cruelly distant. A hotel manager smirked as he bluntly informed her that her reservation had been canceled due to what he called a mistake. She fought the urge to shout. How could he dismiss her like this? Every insult echoed painfully in her mind, the whispers she knew she would endure throughout her career, the lingering doubts of her worth that stemmed from her modest upbringing. She hesitated. Should she maintain her composure, channeling her father's teachings of dignity in the face of adversity? A flurry of emotions surged within her, anger battling despair, pragmatism colliding with relentless optimism. Emma closed her eyes for a brief moment. The warmth of sunlight illuminated the lobby behind her, mocking her struggle. Each chuckle, each dismissive glance sent her spiraling deeper into the noise of imposter syndrome. But she couldn't remain invisible. Before she could get lost in the chaos of her thoughts, she spotted a group of fellow entrepreneurs. She felt drawn to them, to their shared stories of battles fought and victories claimed. They too had faced the harsh judgment of the industry. In mere minutes, her inner courage ignited. She had to break the silence. "Let's share our stories," she urged, in a voice that surprised even herself. The way she articulated her pain seemed to resonate, forging connections with her peers, igniting a fire of rebellion against the glaring elitism surrounding them. Our worth isn't determined by the glitz of these walls. It's what we've built from our hearts and minds. The group responded with murmurs of agreement, their frustration building like a storm. Emma's conviction thrummed through the air, a force of solidarity that momentarily eased her anxiety. Yet a gnawing doubt whispered in her ear. Was she condemning herself to further isolation? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension gripped her tighter as she turned back toward the hotel's entrance. The walls that had once appeared magnificent now felt suffocatingly hostile. Each step echoed her internal monologue. This fight was hers to wage, not just for her own dignity, but for every overlooked. Visionary. Her resolve sharpened. As her heart thumped like a war drum, she stepped inside the glimmering lobby once more, determined to confront the hotel staff and reclaim her space at the forefront of innovation. Just as she prepared for her stand, her phone vibrated, throwing her back into the whirlwind of urgency. A news alert popped up. Her call for justice was trending, sparked from a moment she thought would humiliate her. Heads turned, each gaze burning with curiosity. But now the question loomed larger. Would this be a moment of empowerment or the beginning of a new struggle? As the hotel manager approached, a challenge dancing in his eyes, Emma paused, teetering between fear and bravery, poised at the edge of a pivotal decision that could change everything. The world abruptly shifted as Emma focused her gaze on the hotel manager, the man who had struck a blow to her aspirations and questioned her purpose in this industry. His confident demeanor radiated an arrogance she found infuriating, yet part of her recognized the vulnerability behind his facade. She inhaled deeply, fighting the urge to let her insecurities flood back in. She felt the presence of her peers behind her, their energy pulsing with hope, disappointment, and shared resolve. "Emma Carter," she introduced firmly, steadying her voice against the weight of her emotions. The manager's smugness cracked ever so slightly. I had a reservation that was supposed to lead to a presentation about my company's groundbreaking technology designed to improve accessibility for everyone. It seems you think my work is less than worthy of your attention." Each word was carefully chosen, echoing her conviction in the importance of her innovations. The thrill of defiance coursed through her veins, overshadowing the gnawing doubts. Yet the face of their dismissive leader revealed a wall of indifference, one that made her realize all too painfully that her battle was far from over. With a deeper resolve igniting her core, she kept her eyes locked onto his. "The tech I created empowers individuals who need it most, but if you can't respect that, it speaks volumes about the skyline of your establishment." She sensed her audience leaning closer, a collective breath in sync with her rising declaration. The hotel manager began to speak, but Emma cut him off. "This isn't just about one hotel. This is about how often innovators like myself are pushed aside because we don't fit a particular mold. Do you understand how many people could benefit from what I've built?" The room grew quieter as her conviction gathered strength, her voice filled with more urgency. "Your dismissive response isn't just a single mistake. It's a symptom of a much larger problem in this industry, and I won't stand idly by while visionaries are marginalized." Unexpectedly, people started to gather around her, eyes shifting from the manager to Emma, the shiny facade of the hotel losing its allure, becoming merely a backdrop to her rising energy. She relished it, a burgeoning movement of voices steadily growing louder, a rebellion against the very ethos she had felt crushed under just hours before. With the atmosphere ignited, an opportunity for her to reclaim this moment unfolded before her. She needed to strategize further. How could she turn this momentous occasion, born from adversity, into a concrete advantage? Ideas began to swirl in her mind about connecting with the entrepreneurs around her, spinning plans to harness this attention. Her initiative wasn't just a fleeting response, it could become a blueprint for action. Yet, lurking within the shadows of her newfound confidence was the creeping question of vulnerability. If she chose this path of assertiveness, could she maintain her professional integrity while risking more public scrutiny? In this moment, Emma felt a shift. She began to see herself less as a victim of circumstance and more as a catalyst for change, embodying the very spirit her father had instilled in her. She had the potential to transcend isolation and assert her rightful place within this innovation landscape, where her voice started to resonate, but doubt still shadowed her ambitions. As the hotel manager shifted his stance, a flicker of concern crossing his features, Emma's determination solidified. There was more at stake than she initially recognized, and she would need to rally her newfound allies quickly. The founding of alliances might very well be the key. With one last look at the manager, Emma declared, "This isn't over. I will be back. This is just the beginning." In the depths of her mind, however, she knew she now faced a choice. Would she brave the uncertain waters of innovation with this newfound strength, or would the very industry she fought to transform push her back into silence once more? The tension hung heavy in the air, an invitation for her to lean into the unknown, nudging her forward into uncharted territory where possible alliances awaited. If only she could figure out how to navigate them. Would Emma take the leap, risking everything for her vision, or would doubt tether her to the sidelines once more? The exhilaration coursing through Emma felt both electric and terrifying. As she stepped away from the confrontation with the hotel manager, a rush of adrenaline blotted out her lingering doubts. She scanned the faces of her peers, their expressions a mirror of her own intensity. This was not merely a challenge. It was her chance to forge meaningful connections in a space that had previously felt daunting. In that moment, she realized she couldn't leave her future in the hands of an arrogant manager. She needed to channel this momentum into something bigger. Gathering her thoughts, Emma started to approach a small group of fellow entrepreneurs who had witnessed her standoff. Each person represented a flicker of ambition she could tap into, a potential ally to help reinforce her position while gaining insights from their journeys. "Hey, I'm Emma," she introduced herself, peering deeply into their eyes, willing them to see her resolve. "I think we share a vision that's worth fighting for. This industry needs a shake-up, and together I believe we can be the catalyst." The group exchanged glances, impressed by Emma's unexpected confidence. She could feel their curiosity stirring. She was no longer just a woman spurned, but a challenger ready to lead an uprising. One man, clad in a tailored blazer that belied his tech-savvy demeanor, stepped forward. "I'm David," he said, extending a hand. "Your words were powerful. We've all felt the sting of dismissal, but combining our voices could amplify our impact." The potential of collaboration sparked within her. This was how she could cement her resolve. They huddled closer, the ambiance thick with aspirations and grievances that sought acknowledgement. Emma articulated her vision of a unified front, each innovator bringing something unique to the table. They spoke of shared technical goals, brainstorming ways to revolutionize the industry by prioritizing accessibility for all. But as she spoke, a wary thought hovered in her mind. Emma had always valued her independence, wary of predators hidden among allies. How could she ensure this newfound collective didn't exploit her vulnerabilities, using her ambitious ideas for their gains? She made a mental note to be cautious about who she placed her trust in. With each plan they structured, her confidence surged. "Let's leverage social media," Emma proposed, feeling invigorated. "We can create our own narrative around innovation. Highlight how accessibility isn't just a trend, but a necessity." She watched as nods and excited murmurs trickled through the group. But as enthusiasm grew, so did her internal conflict. This forceful new identity both thrilled and terrified her. Emma's mind raced through the consequences of stepping into this role of a leader. Would they expect her to be infallible? Could she maintain her authenticity while wearing the mantle of authority? Determined not to let her self-doubt return, she cherished the fire of her ambition. "We're going to shake things up, but we'll do it on our terms," she declared, her voice resolute. There would be no returning to the sidelines. Just then, the hotel manager's voice cut through the energy. "What's going on over here?" he questioned, a mix of annoyance and disbelief that anyone would dare to unify against him. Emma stood tall, no longer intimidated by his presence. "We're forming a coalition," she said, each word clear and defiant. "You may think you can dismiss innovation at your establishment, but together we're going to bring the change this industry desperately needs." Unexpectedly, she felt a surge of support from her peers, their shared resolve standing alongside her. It was a pivotal moment. The atmosphere crackled, and for the first time she understood the weight of her own potential. Yet, as she relished this turning point, another doubt emerged, lurking like an unseen shadow. Were they genuinely prepared for the backlash that would surely follow? Emma would need to fortify herself, not just against external challenges, but against the internal fears of inadequacy that always seemed to lurk nearby. As she faced the manager, she sensed her next step calling. "This isn't about a single hotel or a single moment anymore. I'm ready for the challenge. Are you?" Emma's heart raced, anticipation mingling with fear as she contemplated the storm ahead. The stakes felt higher than ever, and she had ignited something she couldn't control completely. Would she be able to face the industry's barriers head-on and emerge victorious? Or would the pressure of her newfound ambitions crush everything she held dear? The moment of truth loomed, challenging her to confront her deepest fears as she prepared for the chaos that was about to unfold. The path was treacherous, but a fire burned within her, pushing her forward into the uncharted territories of her burgeoning leadership. What awaited her just beyond the horizon remained uncertain, yet exhilarating. Emma felt the tension in the air shift as her words echoed back from the hotel manager. The collective energy felt buoyant yet fragile, akin to a tightly wound spring ready to snap. This was more than a confrontation. It was a battleground for her ideals, for the mission she had begun to carve out amid the chaos. "Who do you think you are?" the manager retorted, skeptically eyeing the group. The dismissive edge in his voice threatened to unravel their progress. Yet instead of retreating, Emma stood more resolutely. "I'm someone who believes that change doesn't wait for permission," she responded, her voice steady and unwavering. Inside her, a metamorphosis was unfolding, each breath igniting an instinct to challenge and combat not just the man before her, but the systemic barriers she had grown increasingly aware of. David leaned in, his expression mirroring Emma's steadfastness. "We are the innovators, and we won't be marginalized. You've made a mistake underestimating us." The ripple of his words reinforced her conviction, creating an unbreakable chain of unity. Emma couldn't ignore the warmth of solidarity that ignited her spirit. Every member of the group fostered a shared vulnerability that resonated deeply with her own fears. Reflecting on their mission, she felt her conviction sharpen. This was not merely about personal ambition, it was a collective push against mediocrity and dismissal. The manager's eyes flared with irritation, but the gravity of their resolve weighed against his defiance. Emma observed him and took the moment to reflect on her own shortcomings, not to dwell, but to harness them. Deep down, there was still that nagging thought. Was she truly prepared for the fallout from her choices? The apprehension tugged at her, a reminder of the stakes she was gambling with. As the manager attempted to regain control and rattle them further, barking orders and threats, Emma held her ground. For years, she had shied away from conflict, fearing it would expose her inadequacies. Yet here she was, an agent of change, ready to face the risks head-on. "Your outdated policies won't hold us back any longer," Emma declared, her heart racing in time with the excitement boiling in her chest. A wave of murmurs emerged, a chorus of agreement from her allies. Emma realized she was shifting from simply reacting to proactively strategizing. The anxiety that once tethered her began to morph into an awareness of her agency. She was no longer that passive onlooker. She was a leader with a vision, capable of mapping out her course with intention. As they formulated their next steps, a plan began to crystallize in her mind. Social media would be their megaphone. But she knew she had to articulate her thoughts clearly. This was a matter of clarity in purpose. They needed a public statement, something that would echo in the rooms of power and challenge the status quo while laying bare the current grievances. Suddenly fueled by clarity, Emma proposed their next move. "Let's all share our stories. Let's show the industry the real human cost of their negligence." The room buzzed with agreement. It was as if a dam had burst, flooding them with newfound determination. Yet in the exhilaration of mixing tactics and personal narratives, a chilling apprehension flared within Emma. Daring to expose themselves meant inviting scrutiny, not only from the gatekeepers they challenged, but also from potential allies lurking in the shadows. The enormity of her shift weighed heavily. Leading meant exposing herself, not just to critique, but to vulnerability. How would she adjust if questioned? Doubt threatened the position of promise she had just begun to embrace. Before she could become engulfed in that apprehension, the hotel manager interrupted, his voice slicing through their determination. "You think you can take us on? This is just the beginning of your undoing. You're stepping into dangerous waters." The threat hung in the atmosphere, heavy with foreboding. Emma felt a visceral response ignite within her. This was the crucible in which she would forge her true character. Determined, she raised her chin slightly, eyeing the manager with stealing resolve. Let's see if your arrogance can withstand the tides of change. With that, Emma stepped away from the confrontation, feeling a surge of electrifying awareness that she was stepping into a storm of her own making. This was only the beginning, and as the stakes continued to rise, she sensed the potential for personal transformation bridging into something far greater. What Emma had yet to confront was the emotional turmoil of leading a charge filled with unmistakable risks. As she prepared for the inevitable backlash, a sense of foreboding loomed, lurking just out of reach. Would she maintain her authenticity, or would the demands of leadership unravel the very essence of who she was? Emma walked away from the confrontation with her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. The adrenaline surged through her, yet a creeping self-doubt shadowed the exhilaration. She had made bold choices today, confronting not only a powerful figure, but the quiet insecurities that had long rooted themselves in her psyche. But could she sustain this newfound intensity amid the growing pressures? In the privacy of her hotel room, Emma took a deep breath, planting herself firmly in the moment. Reflection washed over her like a critical tide, every detail of the encounter replayed in her mind. Her words had been potent, resonating with truth, yet there was still uncertainty. She was aware that her initiative would draw fire not only from the management, but also from within her own ranks. With each statement she planned to release, personal risks multiplied. She questioned her ability to defend her convictions when met with severe scrutiny. On her desk lay her laptop, its screen barely illuminated in the dim glow of the room. Emma opened it, fatigue creeping in around the edges of her focus. Thoughts darted through her mind, stories to share, statistics to bolster her message, narratives that would humanize the impact of negligence. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. In the boldness of her words, she sought not just accountability for herself, but for an entire community of voices silenced by systemic indifference. Each story counted. They weren't mere anecdotes. They were lifelines connecting emotions and experiences to the stark reality of the industry. Yet an all-too-familiar thread of anxiety twisted in her stomach. What if she misrepresented their pain? What if she became the very archetype of the leader she once resented, someone who dedicated herself to personal ambition at the expense of transparency? Suddenly overwhelmed, she forced herself to halt. It was essential to recall the resolve she had summoned during their earlier confrontation. There had been power in that collective voice, a fragile strength that could not be ignored. Emma drilled down further into her motivations. The shared vulnerability among her allies was a pillar of her purpose, spurring her beyond the confines of her own narrative. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a veil of twilight over her surroundings, she began to type. Each keystroke became an act of defiance against self-doubt, an affirmation of her commitment to authenticity. The words flowed. Tales of resilience, struggles against outdated practices, unyielding hope for a changing landscape. But between the lines of inspiration lurked a harsh reality. What if her actions triggered repercussions she hadn't anticipated? What if she lost everything she had fought for? Emma sat back, massaging her temples as the enormity of her vision crashed over her. The industry was not inclined to embrace these narratives willingly. She would need a strategy that balanced boldness with prudence. In her mind, Emma conjured a mental map of the potential pathways forward. Should she enlist legal counsel to safeguard against retaliation? What safeguards could protect her allies, ensuring their safety while pursuing the narratives she hoped to amplify? Every consideration spun like a web in her thoughts, interconnected yet intricate, beautiful yet fraught with danger. Suddenly an idea sparked in her consciousness, illuminating a potential crux of her campaign. What if she organized an event, not only to narrate their stories, but also to allow those in power to witness the faces behind the statistics? She imagined an assembly of voices, a public display of unity without sacrificing vulnerability. But how would she approach logistics? How would she counteract any pushback from those determined to protect the status quo? Emma's resolve bubbled again. This was the moment to seize responsibility and craft a recalibrated identity, not just for herself, but for everyone who felt unheard. The challenge loomed larger, but in embracing it, she recognized the opportunity for transformation, not just personally, but collectively. As her plans began to crystallize on the screen, triumph and trepidation battled within her. Emma knew she was standing at the precipice of something monumental. Would she navigate the labyrinth of opposition unscathed, or would she have to confront shadows from her past that challenged her leadership ethos? Determination surged within her as she hesitated at the precipice outside her comfort zone. Was she truly ready for the storm brewing on the horizon? And just how far was she willing to go in her pursuit of justice? The air thick with impending choices, Emma stared at her laptop, teetering on the edge of her professional and personal evolution. The moment to act felt imminent, daring her to leap, to embrace the unknown. Each breath she took became a question of authenticity. Would she emerge victorious, or would the very ideals she sought to defend unravel before her eyes? Emma awoke the next morning to the muted sounds of city life outside her window. The sun, a hesitant rise, cast a delicate light that signaled new beginnings. Yet she felt a heavy cloak of anxiety settle over her. This was her day, the day she would set her intentions into motion. Leaning against the comfortable backdrop of her bed, she reflected on the previous night, reminding herself that uncertainty was a natural part of transformation. After a quick breakfast, Emma opened her laptop with steely resolve, her fingers tingling with anticipation and fear. She had created an outline for her project, a series of compelling narratives, framed within a larger call for accountability. But now it lacked a significant component: how to frame her voice adequately amidst the noise of those who preferred the status quo. The fight ahead wouldn't just be against apathy, it would be against years of ingrained power dynamics that pushed such stories to the margins. Confronted with the enormity of her aspirations, she made a list of potential allies, individuals she believed could provide insight, support, or even just the wisdom of experience. She made calls, some resulting in encouragement, others tinged with skepticism. Each conversation illuminated different aspects of her fight. The doubts lingered. Would they join her or turn against her? Did they share her vision or harbor their fears? Emma instinctively gravitated towards the turbulent waters of research, statistics serving as both armor and sword. She felt the need for empirical backing, knowing that if she was to challenge assertions made by those in positions of power, she needed more than passion. She required indisputable facts. As she pieced together case studies, she stumbled upon an article that pulled her focus. Disturbingly, it highlighted similar incidents of neglect and suppression that had gone unreported in her industry, along with the fallout experienced by those who dared to expose the truth. Her heart raced as she read, unsettling truths pushing against the boundaries of her understanding. Fear gripped her. If she revealed this information, would she be the next target? Yet something deep inside urged her on. This wasn't just about her. It was the path to pay homage to those before her who hadn't survived their attempts at revealing harsh realities. Emma stepped back, conducting a mental inventory of her resources. She had a network that could help her craft her narrative into something more than an emotional plea. It could become a demanding call for change. But getting those stories into the public domain required strategic and careful planning. With renewed determination, she drafted an email to a seasoned journalist she knew, someone who had fought battles much like her own, someone who could guide her through this storm. Her words flowed with a clarity she hadn't anticipated. A short introduction encapsulating her intent, a request for advice, and an offer of collaboration. The message felt impactful. It addressed both urgency and need, devoid of the shadows of self-doubt. While she waited for a response, Emma considered how to address the apparent power imbalance within her workplace. Should she confront her superiors directly, or would it be wiser to escalate through formal channels? Her instincts urged caution, yet the thought of remaining silent felt like a betrayal to those whose stories she had uncovered. Towards the afternoon, an email notification chimed, a response from the journalist, expressing interest in her initiative and offering to meet. Elation surged, but so did trepidation. This was a pivotal moment. The foundation of her proposed confrontation was beginning to take shape. As she hit send on her reply, a realization crystallized in her mind. She wasn't just gathering stories, she was building a movement. Each decision ahead would test her potential and morality. As challenges loomed, so did opportunities for personal growth. Emma glanced at the clock. The day was far from over. Her next steps beckoned like a whisper, urging her toward uncharted waters. Suddenly, a notification lit up her screen, this time a message from her workplace involving an urgent staff meeting about recent complaints. Tension coiled in her stomach. The time had come to face old demons while standing resolute in her newfound identity. Would she uphold her commitment to authenticity and justice, even if it meant risking everything? Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her choices pressing against her chest as she prepared for the confrontation that lay ahead. Emma stood in front of the mirror, her reflection a cacophony of resolve and uncertainty. The urgent staff meeting lurked heavily in her mind, the gravity of her next steps echoing in her core. Breathing deeply, she rehearsed her points. Stay authentic. Emphasize accountability. But even as she mentally prepared, self-doubt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. She arrived at the conference room, her colleagues already seated, their conversations muffled against the sterile walls decorated with corporate art. Emma could sense the weight of their eyes, skeptical yet expectant. As the head of HR took her place at the front, the room fell silent, each face a mask of anticipation. Emma gripped the edge of the table and steadied herself. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for both mentally and emotionally. With a few succinct words, the HR manager recounted the complaints, vague enough to avoid specificity, yet pointed enough to gauge the resonating tension in the room. Emma's heart quickened. She felt the undercurrent of dissent buzzing around her. When the time came, her voice emerged firm and unwavering. These complaints deserve serious consideration. We can't dismiss the common threads of fear and silence. Quick glances of disbelief met her proposal, yet she pressed on. It's not just about addressing complaints. It's about understanding the culture that allows them to fester. We need to build an environment where stories can be heard and acknowledged. The words were gaining momentum, fueled by the urgency of her mission. As she spoke, Emma noticed the body language of her colleagues. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned in, intrigued. This was no longer just a meeting. It morphed into an opportunity for catharsis. A hand shot up, interrupting her flow. "But what's the point of hearing them? Won't we just create more problems?" questioned a senior executive, his skepticism evident. The question gnawed at her. It was a sentiment that many had echoed. Emma felt a swell of frustration mixed with clarity. If we don't confront discomfort, we maintain the status quo. Stories matter. People matter. Change necessitates risk. Her voice rang, deeper than she felt. The audacity of her assertions stirred something in her, a piece of herself she barely recognized. When the meeting ended, there wasn't a sudden consensus, but something shifted. Colleagues lingered, discussing her points animatedly, their guardedness waning, if only slightly. Emma left, an unfamiliar satisfaction enveloping her. She had stood at the intersection of fear and honesty, and she had chosen the road of transparency. However, this newfound courage introduced a complexity she hadn't anticipated. With each small victory, she felt the pressure intensify. Navigating the corporate labyrinth was fraught with landmines. Would her superiors retaliate? Could she lose her position entirely for inspiring discomfort? The worries trailed behind her as she returned home. Later that evening, Emma received another email from the journalist. This time, she was invited to share her insights on a panel discussing workplace accountability. The prospect thrilled her, but ignited a flicker of apprehension. Speaking would amplify her voice, but it also posed a risk. What if her words weren't received well? Or worse yet, what if they pointed fingers back at her? The adrenaline from the day's events subsided. She sat with her thoughts, processing the implications of her spiraling focus. She was no longer just an employee. She was part of a narrative that had the potential to unravel decades of silence. But with this empowerment came the heavy burden of responsibility. Tomorrow she would respond, but for now, Emma lingered in the discomfort of her choices, her heart pounding in rhythm with her own growing determination. Embracing her role as a catalyst for change wasn't just an obligation, it was a moment of personal rebirth. But just as she contemplated her next steps, an urgent text came through from a fellow employee, spelling out the crisis in real time. A whistleblower from higher up had stepped forward. Emma's fingers hovered above her keyboard, her mind racing with implications. What did this mean for her fight? Would she have an ally, or would this threaten everything she attempted to build? With her resolve on the precipice of something greater, she faced the night, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. How would this revelation shape her journey? The morning sun poured through Emma's window, casting a warm glow that belied the turmoil roiling inside her. The text from her colleague repeated in her mind, urgent and demanding. A whistleblower had surfaced. As she brewed her coffee, she wrestled with the implications. Did this person hold vital information that would aid her movement, or would their revelations further complicate an already fraught landscape? After much hesitation, she checked her emails. The invitation to the panel lingered there, a beacon calling her to engage in the very discussions she sought to catalyze. Pausing, she thought deeply about her decision. This was a chance to define her narrative, to share insights that could inspire others. But it was also a risk. Speaking out could invite scrutiny and backlash, especially if her colleagues still clung to their fear-laden silences. Her mind raced, iterating potential outcomes as she drafted a response to the journalist. Each word weighed heavily, dripping with the responsibility she now recognized. "I accept," she typed, her fingers trembling. "Push through the fear," she reminded herself, fueled by yesterday's victory in the meeting. There was empowerment in vocalizing her thoughts, yet the lingering apprehension wore on her like a tangible cloak. With a mixture of dread and motivation, she finally hit send. Once she arrived at work, the atmosphere was different. Whispers traced the halls, and a current of anxiety hung in the air. Emma moved purposefully, grounding herself as she navigated the already scrutinizing eyes of her colleagues. They gathered in small clusters, some discussing the whistleblower's emergence, while others appeared unsure how to proceed, unsettled by the mounting pressure for change. A sinking realization clawed at her. She was at the epicenter of their anticipation, a position she hadn't fully prepared for. But as Emma approached the break room, she felt an unlikely surge of determination. It was her moment to galvanize her colleagues. Embracing accountability meant not just addressing issues, but facing them openly. She took a deep breath and stepped into the break room, where several coworkers had gathered nervously. "I know it's overwhelming right now, but we have a chance for change," she began, voice steadying. "This whistleblower could be the catalyst we need to confront the culture of silence and fear. We can be a part of this dialogue." Initially, uncertainty hung over the group. A senior analyst, whom Emma respected, spoke up. But what if speaking out makes things worse? What if it backfires? Emma met their gaze, knowing this was a pivotal moment. Change is inherently risky, but isn't maintaining the status quo an even greater risk? We have to decide what we value more, comfort or growth. Her words ignited a chain reaction. A few others nodded, some leaning in, eager to contribute their thoughts. This was no longer just Emma's initiative. They were beginning to find their voices. But as discussions unfolded, a subtle tension remained. She could sense the undercurrents of fear lingering. Emma needed to provide not just motivation, but also a sense of security. She suggested forming a support group focused on encouraging open communication, an actual framework for building a culture of accountability. However, her initiative drew sharp criticism from a more senior colleague who had been in the company for years, his voice echoing skepticism. "Do you think it's wise to create a committee that invites confrontation? The backlash could jeopardize all of our positions." Emma stood taller, adrenaline coursing through her as confrontation stared her down. Could she afford to clash with authority in pursuit of progress? "That's exactly the point," she rebutted, feeling the weight of the room upon her. "If we don't face these issues head-on, we will continue to compromise our integrity. We owe it to ourselves to push the boundaries of this dialogue." The tension in the air shifted, uncertainty twisting into potential. Emma realized her influence was sparking something in those willing to embrace the risk. But what if the backlash was more than she could shoulder? What if her rise led to others falling? The thought shattered her focus. The conversation broke momentarily, and Emma caught sight of someone moving toward her from across the room. It was the whistleblower, emerging from the back with a shadow of hesitation cast across their features. As the new ally approached, Emma realized the stakes of her journey had just escalated. Would this revelation solidify her mission, or would it unravel everything she had fought to build? The answers loomed, tantalizingly close, but obscured by uncertainty. Emma's heart pounded in anticipation of the pivotal choices that lay ahead. Emma's breath quickened as the whistleblower closed the distance, an unexpected vulnerability radiating from their hunched posture. She could see the apprehension etched on their face, mirroring the trepidation she felt inside. This moment could define them both. The weight of their choices pressed heavily on her chest. "Emma," the whistleblower said softly, voice quavering as if each word could shift the delicate balance of their situation. "I have information that could change things, but I'm not sure I'm ready for the consequences." She felt a swell of empathy mixed with fierce resolve. "You've already taken a brave step by coming forward. This is about more than just us. It's about everyone who has had to suffer in silence." Their eyes darted around the break room, nervousness igniting Emma's own worries. She sensed the urgency of the moment. A decision loomed. Would she support them fully or proceed with caution? The realization struck her forcefully. Her response here could either embolden this ally or perpetuate the cycle of fear. Emma placed her hand on the whistleblower's arm, grounding them both in the moment. "Let's talk privately. You have a voice that deserves to be heard without judgment." She led them to the conference room, heart racing, not just from the threat of exposure, but from the exhilaration of action, of movement towards breaking the oppressive silence that had suffocated so many. Inside, Emma closed the door, creating a barrier against the outside world. "What do you want to share?" she pressed gently, sensing the hesitation, but also a spark of determination flickering in their eyes. Taking a deep breath, the whistleblower began. "I've gathered evidence of unethical practices, and I believe it ties back to some of the top management. I don't know how to navigate this alone, and I fear that no matter how much I expose, they'll figure out a way to silence me." Emma's mind raced. The information could revolutionize their battle for transparency, but she grappled with the potential backlash that could devastate not just her, but everyone involved. It wasn't just a question of ethics, it was one of survival. Career paths and reputations were at stake. "What if we were to approach this together?" Emma proposed, her voice steady, even as her heart thundered. "We can prepare a strategy that focuses on the issues, protects your identity, and positions us to handle any fallout. Your bravery has ignited a chance for real change." The whistleblower nodded slowly, considering her words. "Are you willing to take that risk? You're already under enough pressure," they murmured, vulnerability giving way to courage. "Yes," Emma replied firmly, her resolve crystallizing. "I can't take a half measure. We owe it to our colleagues and ourselves to ensure this isn't swept under the rug. Perhaps this is the catalyst for a more significant movement within our company." As she spoke, she felt an awakening within herself, a burgeoning sense of purpose that outshone her previous fears. This was more than a battle. It was a crusade for integrity and accountability. But doubt edged in. What if her burgeoning leadership was merely a facade? What if, amidst all this hope, she overwhelmed rather than uplifted? Seizing the moment, she pushed forward. "Let's draft a plan for how we can safely present this information. It's time we stop
allowing fear to dictate our lives." With renewed energy, they began to outline their ideas and potential strategies. Dialogue sparked between them, an exhilarating blend of ideas that fueled Emma's passion. Yet, as the outline flourished under her pen, a chilling thought crept into her mind. What if management discovered their conversations? What if she inadvertently placed not just herself, but this whistleblower in jeopardy? Each stroke of the pen felt laced with risk, underscoring the very real threat of retaliation lurking in every corner of the corporate landscape. As the discussion deepened, Emma sensed a shift from trepidation to empowerment, an undeniable momentum that seemed to ripple through their collaboration. But there was still something lurking in the shadows. She could feel the weight of her responsibilities bearing down on her. "Emma," the whistleblower's pleading eyes met hers. "We have to be careful. If we expose this, we need to be ready for the fallout." Emma nodded, her stomach knotting with the myriad of potential outcomes. The stakes had escalated beyond her initial calculations, evolving into a fight for transparency that threatened to engulf them both. Their eyes locked in mutual understanding. Emma realized that their paths were intertwined beyond professional ambition. This was a test of moral fiber, an exploration of how far she was willing to go to dismantle the fortress of fear. Just then, the conference room door swung open, revealing the senior colleague, the very one who had dismissed her earlier efforts. "What's going on in here?" he demanded, his presence a dark cloud filling the room. The atmosphere shifted, and Emma could feel her heart pounding in her ears. The confrontation she had feared now stood before her, a tangible challenge to the trajectory she had begun to carve. With her composure steadied, Emma took a deep breath, aware that the next few moments would either solidify her new direction or spiral her efforts out of control. Would she confront this opposing force head-on, or would she retreat into the shadows? The choice lay before her, and as she opened her mouth to speak, the question loomed in the air. Was she truly prepared to face the backlash in pursuit of the change she believed in? Emma stood her ground, her heart racing in her chest as she faced the senior colleague, who stared expectantly. She could feel the whistleblower's anxious presence beside her, mirroring her own uncertainty. But this moment was pivotal, not just for Emma, but for all those who had endured the culture of silence in their workplace. "What's going on in here?" he repeated, his tone laced with suspicion. "We're discussing a matter of significant importance," Emma replied, her voice unwavering despite the weight bearing down on her. "The recent whistleblower's revelations demand our attention and could lead to necessary changes within our organization." The air crackled with tension, and for a brief moment, the senior colleague seemed taken aback. The heat of the moment pushed back against her internal reservations. Now
Was not the time to falter. Are you naive enough to think that confronting this will lead to anything but disaster? His disbelief hung heavy, a challenge laden with unspoken disapproval. Emma squared her shoulders, finding newfound strength within. No, I'm realistic enough to understand that ignoring it sets a precedent for more silence. Change isn't meant to be comfortable. It's meant to challenge and inspire growth. We have to take a stand if we want to be a part of that change. Growth comes with caution, he replied sharply. You're opening a can of worms that could easily lead to our downfall. You don't want to become the scapegoat when backlash hits. Emma felt the panic rising, yet she focused on the whistleblower beside her. This wasn't just about her ambitions, it was about their collective right to voice grievances that had long been stifled. Perhaps it's time to examine how what we've accepted as normal has stifled our integrity and well-being, Emma countered, meeting his gaze with unflinching resolve. His eyes narrowed. You're risking your career for what? A chance to be the hero in your own story? Not just my story, Emma answered, her voice resonating with conviction. I'm fighting for every single individual who has faced the same challenges that we have, for those silenced and without representation. The silence was palpable. Emma sensed the wheels beginning to turn, the air thick with the gravity of her words. There was a collective weight pressing against them, a realization dawning that perhaps it was indeed time to confront the murky undercurrents of their corporate culture. Yet doubts still clouded her mind. Was she truly prepared for the storm that would follow this defiance? Would her commitment to transparency put not just her position, but everyone's stability at risk? The senior colleague shifted. His expression softened, if only slightly. And what happens if you lose? You need to think about how much you're willing to stake on this. I'm not losing anything that's worth keeping, Emma asserted, her confidence surging. If we allow fear to dictate our actions, we lose much more than our jobs. We lose our integrity. At that moment, she felt a shift. It wasn't just about her standing firm. It was a powerful representation of her peers' collective voice. The whistleblower stood a little taller, a silent validation of her resolve. Their senior colleague seemed to ponder. You've got guts, Emma, but this isn't a battle you can fight alone. I'm not alone, Emma replied, her heart racing with potential. There's a whole team ready to confront this with me. We just need the right framework to support each other when it gets tough. For a heartbeat, Emma believed his skepticism softened, and then he nodded. I'll hear the concerns, but you must prepare for the backlash. You understand that a public stance will incite strong reactions from upper management? I understand, Emma affirmed, her pulse quickening. But it's a risk I'm willing to take. For the sake of our integrity, every voice we expose is a ripple that can create a wave of lasting change. He studied her for a moment, assessing the depth of her commitment. With a begrudging acceptance, he replied, Fine, but tread carefully. Stay professional in your approach. With that, Emma felt an air of victory wash over her. She had not only stood her ground, but had opened a door for a deeper dialogue about accountability and transparency. Returning to the break room alongside the whistleblower, her heart raced, not from fear, but from the exhilarating taste of progress. Once seated, Emma began taking notes, brainstorming how to present their concerns constructively. Their synergy ignited newfound ideas, the fire of camaraderie fueling her resolve. They meticulously prepared their narrative, outlining how they could frame the information to deter retaliation while demanding accountability. Over the next few days, they crafted a comprehensive report detailing the systemic failures and the human consequences of their silence. Emma's sense of purpose crystallized. She wasn't merely fighting for herself, but for every marginalized voice echoing in the forum of their corporate culture. Finally, the day came to present their findings to management.
Emma stood before her colleagues, confidence coursing through her as she recalled her journey. She saw familiar faces in the room, some anxious, some eager, all waiting. We've gathered here today to shine a light on the challenges we faced, to propose change rather than comfort. As she spoke, her voice resonated beyond her own fears. It echoed the voices of countless others yearning for change. She cemented her journey from a place of insecurity to one of empowerment, motivated by the genuine need for justice for all in her workplace. The senior colleague who had doubted her leaned in, and a soft nod from him signaled a shared understanding, an affirmation of their collaborative pursuits. As questions began to flow, Emma felt a sense of belonging she had long sought. Her fight for justice had propelled her into her rightful position as a leader among her peers. The nerves that once paralyzed her now transformed into anticipation. Would their cries for change resonate, or would the forces of complacency drown them out? This wasn't the end, but a new beginning, a celebration of how far she had come, a testament to true resilience. As the meeting concluded, applause rippled through the room, an acknowledgement of growth. Their voices had been heard. Emma felt a swell of accomplishment, a hard-earned recognition of her transformation. She realized she had not only challenged the status quo, she exemplified the power of collective courage. In that moment, surrounded by support, Emma stood tall, a leader ready to forge ahead, confident in her capacity to effect change, not just for herself, but for all who dared to dream of a better future. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to hear your thoughts. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.